I'm Jody Emery. I'm here today calling upon the Public Safety Minister, Stephen Blaney, to please approve the transfer request application of my husband. My husband, Marc Emery, is currently incarcerated in Mississippi State, where he is serving a 5-year sentence for selling seeds through the mail from Canada. The United States government has agreed that Marc is eligible for transfer to Canada. They've reviewed his application, and they've said that he is able to come home. Unfortunately, I'm just waiting on the Canadian government to agree as well. It's simply a document that the government has had since 2011 to review Marc's transfer request. But since July of this year, we've been waiting for the government here to make a decision on my husband's transfer request. It's very difficult for me, and I'm bringing a picture here of my husband and I in prison. I have to travel all the way down to Mississippi to see him, and it causes a lot of suffering and expense and hardship for me to have to go so far to see my husband. And I'm simply asking the Public Safety Minister, Stephen Blaney, to approve Marc's transfer request to come home and to recognize that there is enormous public and political support for Marc's transfer over the years, asking for him to please finish his sentence in Canada. So I'm honored to be joined by members of the opposition who are here to represent many Canadians who feel that Marc Emery should be transferred home, and I'm grateful for their support in advocating for a Canadian citizen who has never harmed anyone, for him to be able to return to his home country of Canada, and that the government should recognize his citizenship and bring him home to me, his wife, who desperately wants him back at home close to me. So I'd like to ask Libby Davies, the Honourable Member of Parliament Libby Davies, to comment on this.
Well, thank you very much, Jody. My name's Libby Davies. I'm the Member of Parliament for Vancouver East, and I've known Jody for many years, and Marc. And the first thing I want to say, Jody, is that you've been remarkable in your courage and your steadfast support of Marc. I've watched you over the years and just the tremendous work that you've done in keeping this campaign alive and bringing it to the public attention. And I totally agree with you. There's tremendous public support to bring Marc home. I was thinking about this issue on my way here and remembering that it was July 2005, so more than 8 years ago, that Marc Emery was arrested by the DEA in Vancouver. I actually remember the day very well because of particular circumstances, and it's really an incredible story that this Canadian, who would never have been charged in Canada for selling seeds on the internet, was arrested and then fought the whole extradition process. Of course, did get extradited, has now received this jail sentence. It's really an incredible story of someone who really has posed no threat, no harm to any Canadian or any U.S. citizen, and has had to go through this incredible process and is now still serving a sentence. I've written to many, many ministers of justice over the years, first of all about the extradition, but now about trying to ensure that Marc is returned to Canada to serve his sentence. And I think it's really important that we speak out clearly and say to the Public Safety Minister today that we want him to consider this case on its merit. They should be putting aside political ideology and political considerations. I was very distressed to see the comments from Mr. Blaney's spokesperson on Monday, who, basically took shots at MPs saying, well, the opposition parties, they want to continue to make the drug trade their priority. This press conference today is not about the drug trade. This press conference today is about a Canadian citizen who has gone through due process in the States to be returned to Canada, has been approved by the U.S. Justice Department to be returned to Canada. So this issue is about whether or not we have a Minister of Public Safety who will be responsible and look at this application and not delay it until it's too late, but look at this application and to make a determination on whether or not Mr. Emery meets the criteria, which we believe he does eminently, and therefore should be returned to Canada so he can be close to his family, his wife, his community, to serve out his sentence. It's that straightforward in terms of the issue that we're presenting today. So I'm very happy to be here. I'd also like to say that the NDP public safety critic, Randall Garrison, couldn't be here today. He's in Toronto, but he also very much supports Jody and this application to the Canadian minister. So we want to say to Mr. Blaney, put aside the politics, do the right thing, allow Marc Emery to come home. You'll be well supported by Canadians if you make that decision. Thank you.
I'm Wayne Easter, the Member of Parliament for Malpeque for the Liberal Party of Canada and the Public Safety Critic for the party. And I too want to congratulate Jody on her campaign to bring Marc home. It's the right thing to do, and I'm going to approach it a little bit of a different angle than Libby did. I'm a former Solicitor General, which is now called the Minister of Public Safety, and I've had considerable experience with the International Transfer of Offenders Act. In fact, I've signed quite a number of transfers when I was Solicitor General. And I think it's important to mention here what was the purpose of that act, and agreements signed with other countries to allow for the transfer of offenders between those countries, and in this particular case, it's the U.S. Simply put, if there's mutual agreement between the two countries, it would allow the prisoner, the offender, to be transferred closer to home. And when you believe in a rehabilitative system, and you believe in not punishing the family of the offender who's involved, then that makes a whole lot of sense. To bring the person who's been charged, the offender, closer to home so they can be with their family. So the family isn't suffering that they can't see, in this case, their husband. That's important to the family and important to the individual in terms of getting on with life when they get out of prison. And you know, until Vic Taves, I'm going to mention this, until Vic Taves came along as minister, it was almost standard procedure for a Minister of Public Safety or a Solicitor General to sign those transfers when there was agreement between the two parties involved. And I think we had to make a determination. If the prison system is all about vindictiveness and punishment, or if it's about rehabilitation and not punishing the other family members who are not the ones that are in prison. There's as Jody said, Marc's transfer has been approved by the United States Department of Justice. Marc's sentencing judge and prosecutor both support that transfer. The only stumbling block is this government. Now, there's two key criteria in terms of allowing a prisoner to come back to Canada and serve out the remainder of his sentence in this country. And that really is that the individual doesn't pose a threat to Canada and that he's not a member of, he or she is not a member of organized crime. Marc Emery clearly fits the criteria. He has the support on the American side, and it only makes sense for this government to allow that transfer to occur so he can serve out the remainder of his sentence in his own country. What's Canadian citizenship mean? That's one of the other key questions here. This is a Canadian citizen, has served a lot of his time in the United States, and I believe the government of Canada has an obligation to sign this transfer and allow him to come back into Canada. And my last point would be this. Stephen Blaney is a new Minister of Public Safety. Stephen Blaney, as Minister, has the opportunity to turn the page and say that this isn't all about political ideology, vindictiveness, and punishment. Marc Emery has served a lot of his time in the United States. He can serve the remainder of his time in this country, and all it takes for him to do that and be here closer to his family is the minister's signature on a document. That's all we're asking this minister to do. Thank you very much.
If I can, I just want to add my words of support as Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands and as leader of the Green Party. It's very clear that Marc Emery, who has been put in a prison in Mississippi, think of that with his wife living in Vancouver, that the distance is extraordinary and the costs to the family are huge. Je veux ajouter un peu en français parce que c'est clair que M. Blaney, maintenant, comme nouveau ministre, a l'opportunité pour faire quelque chose différent que l'ancien ministre Vic Taves. Comme un groupe de députés ici, nous exigeons M. Blaney de signer le permis pour Marc Emery pour finir le temps en prison ici au Canada. Ce n'est pas une demande d'ignorer le crime, mais c'est clair que c'est un crime plus politique que vraiment criminel, mais ça, c'est l'autre chose. C'est clair maintenant que le gouvernement des États-Unis est en accord avec la transition pour Marc Emery pour revenir ici au Canada pour le fin de son temps en prison, plus proche vers son épouse, sa mari et aussi toute sa famille. C'est clair que c'est une question de justice et tout le monde ici exige, demande à M. Blaney signer les formes et permis que M. Emery, quelqu'un qui fait une menace vers personne, pour M. Emery de revenir au Canada. C'est une question de justice. Merci.
You can ask me if they've got any questions.
Yeah. Jody Emery, I guess you said the request has been in since 2011. Have you heard anything at all from public safety with regards to that, whether it was under Taves or with the new minister? And just quickly also how long Emery has left in his sentence?
Well, I haven't heard anything back from the minister myself, except for receiving correspondence from supporters who receive letters acknowledging the receipt of a letter, but basically saying nothing. I've been tweeting at the minister. Twitter is very popular and useful, so he's quite aware of what I'm requesting, but I have not received any answers at all. Before, when Marc applied in 2011, it was the United States government that initially rejected his application, and he did have to wait 2 years. But since the approval of the United States Department of Justice in July, the Canadian government has been able to sign off. There is no deadline for it. It simply requires a bit of pressure, I imagine. But I haven't received any response whatsoever, and I do hope that I will receive one. Marc is doing a 5-year sentence. He was facing 30 years to life and accepted a 5-year plea deal, which began in 2010. His early release for good behavior is 85% of the sentence, and that's July 9th, 2014. So Marc doesn't have too long to go in the remainder of his sentence, but it would make sense to us for him to come home and finish his sentence closer to home on Canadian soil.
And also as a follow-up, some of the MPs mentioned that they think that the fact that it's sort of been unanswered may be politically motivated. I'm wondering what you make of those comments, whether you agree.
I think it's fair to say that my husband, Marc Emery, is very high profile. He's well recognized as a marijuana activist and advocate for legalization. He has always used peaceful, nonviolent means to promote that idea. But this government has taken a very firm stance against marijuana legalization, even though the country next to us is legalizing it right up against our border. I believe that this government isn't interested in transferring Marc. They're not interested in many transfer applications, and I hope that they wouldn't make it political. But unfortunately, as pointed out, the answer they've given is about drug trade, and that's not what this is about at all. It's about a Canadian citizen under the treaty seeking to be brought home. So it might be political. This government tends to take a firm stand against marijuana legalization, and I believe that might have a role to play, but I sure hope it doesn't.